We do have lots of people joining us online as well, I believe. Okay, good morning, everybody. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Samantha Hung, and I'm the Director of the Gender Equality Division here at the Asian Development Bank. It's so great to be speaking to a room full of so many young people and young women in general, because that's not, it's not always our common audience, but it's really appropriate, obviously, for today as we come together for our inaugural commemoration event of the International Day of the Girl, and particularly because today we'll be celebrating the Girl Takeover concept, which is the first time we've done that here at ADB. So, as many of you know, the International Day of the Girl, which is celebrated on the 11th of October every year, last Friday, is an important day on the international calendar to acknowledge and recognize the rights of girls and the unique challenges of girls worldwide. And ADB considers investment in girls and the future of girls is very important for accelerating the gender equality agenda. And it is for that reason that we've come together today in collaboration with Plan International, our partner, long-term partner, and as an internal collaboration across the gender equality, the fragility and engagement, environment and sectors group to celebrate this event. So today we will be exploring a particular topic on young women and nature-based solutions for climate action. And we will be featuring three really impressive women leaders from India, Papua New Guinea and the Philippines. And I will introduce them all consecutively later. But just before doing so, a little bit of housekeeping. The session will be recorded. It is on Zoom. We are live, and I believe we have many participants online. So for those of you that, please come and, there's seats in the front, please take them. So for those of you joining online, please feel free to ask questions in our Q&A online box, and we will come to you later. We hope that everyone will have a meaningful and engaging conversation with us, but I think it's also very important that we remind everyone that this is a safe space, especially for girls. And if anybody feels uncomfortable at any point of the discussion, please, you are welcome to opt up. You're welcome to approach any member of our committee and let us know. For our online participants, please do not share any personal information in the chat. And if you have any safeguarding concern, we also have a safeguarding moderator, I believe, online who can be approached or messaged at any point in time. So as part of today's celebration, we're participating in a global campaign called Girls Takeover, whereby girls step into positions of power or authority to highlight the leadership gap for girls and their role in leadership. And we're really pleased to be part of that today. And later today, actually, we have a girl advocate, Renoa Kate de la Cruz, who's actually taking over the position of my colleague, Ben Graham, the Director of Fragility and Engagement, who's graciously stepping aside. But before we get into that, let's please begin with opening remarks from Director General and Group Chief of the Sectors Group, Ramesh Subramaniam. For the benefit of those of you that are external who may not know Ramesh, he's been at ADB for a very long time. He's got a long career for over 26 years, I believe. His current role is overseeing the Sectors Group, which covers a very, very large department. And he delivers, and this department is responsible for delivering the lending and technical assistance operations in 7 sectors across the whole Asia Pacific region. And he does this in coordination with colleagues in his department, with all regional, private sector and other support departments with ADB. So with no further ado, Ramesh, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sam, for this opportunity. Good morning. Very nice to see all of you. The IDG is a very special occasion for all of us at the ADB. In fact, actually, I would say that most of the days are IDG days. Now, you'll be asking why. If you walk around in the corridor, you know, this is a pretty busy place, the hub that's come about. A lot of people will be sitting there with their laptops, meeting in small groups. most of the people are discussing projects that we do. ADB, as you know, is a development institution. We do lots of projects. As we speak, we have about 1,100 projects that are under implementation. After the projects get approved, both public and private sectors. Now, when we put the projects together, now this is thanks to colleagues like Sam and a wonderful team, gender mainstreaming is so critical. And that is something, people will be sitting and discussing. I'm not exaggerating this. If you just walk past people who are talking about their projects, certainly they would be looking at what can we do better in mainstreaming gender considerations. Now, ADB as the climate bank for the region, for the Asia and the Pacific region, as you know, Asia and the Pacific has done very well in terms of its economic growth, sustaining 6-7% of GDP growth, real GDP growth. This is very good. We've done very well despite the pandemic. But what this also means, developing economies, they obviously have aspirations. Middle class is growing. That means climate change impact is also becoming worse and worse. The region contributes more than 50% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. In fact, closer to home for us, the Pasig River in Manila accounts for 7% of global plastics, global ocean plastics rather. So what this means is we as a development institution in the region need to do a lot more for combating climate change. And as our President Asakawa has always been saying, and also backed by that vision that we need to be the climate bank for the Asia and the Pacific, we've got significant resources. We've got $100 billion in cumulative commitments to be reached by 2030. We also have more money that our board has approved. A significant chunk of that will also be going for climate change. So all of us clearly need to play a very strong role in protecting nature. Not just protecting nature, but we also need to value nature and addressing climate change at our levels. In many of our communities, societies, countries, we always feel young people, particularly girls, young women, are a lot more responsible and aware of the perils of climate change. In my own family, my children are acutely conscious in their lifestyle choices. They don't have cars. They're both grown up, gone out. They use only public transport. We've been asking them, why don't you get even a small car? No, we want to use public transport. Recycling clothing, they're actually much more aware and also very, very nature aware. And I teach several young children on weekends, about 6-7 of them, on largely human values. And they are highly inspired. I'm highly inspired by their commitment to nature. In many of our societies, unfortunately, women also bear the burden of a responsibility for climate change. Take water conservation, for example. They're much more aware of the need to preserve water. They value green space a lot more as they toil in the heat. And they also value, obviously, monetary resources are limited in most of our low-income countries, and they devote the incomes available in a much more responsible manner. Home gardening, as we know, has been growing in many countries. In Philippines, in Manila, for instance, particularly after the pandemic, but in many of our countries. When I grew up in pretty modest, low-income circumstances in India, actually, my mother was a shining example of water conservation and recycling. This is back in the 1970s. In fact, when I look at all the, reducing plastic waste, going for cloth, fabric bags, and so on, that used to be the norm. In fact, in the 70s, in India, we never used plastic bags. It was always like cloth bags and always recycled bags. And she was, I would say, she was a role model. And that continues in the family. My wife, my daughter, all of them do a lot for climate in their own spheres. But unfortunately, the women particularly are also affected by extreme weather patterns. Women are 14 times more likely to die than men in natural disasters. 14 times more likely to die. Now, the sectors group that I have the privilege, as Sam mentioned, of overseeing, has got lots and lots of colleagues who are highly committed, to the cause of climate change, and particularly how can we bring in gender considerations into combating climate change. And coincidentally, we have today and tomorrow several of our donor countries that give grant, concessional resources, and also philanthropic foundations. They're all gathered here to talk about what we are doing as collectively as the development ecosystem. And gender and climate change will be one of the topics that we will continuously be discussing. In fact, in the session that I came out from, focused on water, both water resources and water supply. And in that context, how do we deal with natural disasters? For example, we have a large urban resilience trust fund and community resilience partnership fund, where both gender considerations have been quite prevalent. So thank you, Sam, for giving me this opportunity. We have, looking at the program, we have a fantastic panel, starting with the speakers, and then we will have various interactions. Again, appreciate this chance to speak to you.
Thank you very much, Ramesh, for those insights. And I very much relate to you what you're saying about the young generation being much more climate aware. As a mother of 3 young people, I'm also very inspired at how they just see the whole world differently. And on the point of using public transport, my 3 children, I've actually been bugging them. None of them have a driving license or have any intention to get one. And I'm kind of saying I really appreciate that, but it is also sometimes a life skill to be able to drive. Anyway, that's just a little anecdote. So with that, very pleased now to introduce our girl advocate. Where is our girl advocate? She's there, ready to go. Okay. So Renoa de la Cruz will be our girl advocate in place of Ben, my colleague. And I'd just like to introduce her. So she's a 20-year-old communication student from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. But she is also the current Sangguniang Kabataan Kagawad of Barangay Tanza 1. What that means, for those of us that are not from here, is basically she's the youth representative for her local government in Cavite, which is south of Manila. And in that role, she manages concerns on social inclusion and equity. And she serves as the committee head on the council's gender and development. So she provides feedback to the council on community-based projects from the perspective of young people, and particularly related to disaster risk reduction management. She's also part of a national youth-led media organization called Explained PH that aims to empower young campus journalists around the Philippines. So with that, Noah, the floor is yours.
And thank you so much for the brief introduction. But Tanza is actually in Navotas. Yeah, it's not in Cavite. There have been... It's okay. Yeah, so before I start, can I get a measurement of your energy? When I say energy check, can you say check na check? Would that be okay? Okay. Energy check? Okay, that's my speech. Thank you so much. No. Yeah, so... Yeah, of course, thank you so much for having us here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. So yeah, I am Renoa de la Cruz. You can call me Noah, and I stand here not only as a woman, not only as a youth advocate, but also as a storyteller who shares the stories that we got in our community. So yeah, let's have a quick background when it comes to our city, which is Navotas. So our community, Barangay Tanza, we have a diverse community. We have fisher folks, women, children, youth, members of the LGBTQIA+, and other sectors of the society. So you can say it's very colorful, no? And when disaster happens, all of us and all of these vulnerable sectors experience greater challenges. So as a fisher folk, we live near the coastal areas where we experience heavy floods. And even if we have infrastructures dedicated to mitigate these floods, like the pumping stations, navigational gates, when at times of the worst case scenarios, all of these will be cast aside. And apart from our location, there are also some human activities that heightens these challenges that is faced by us. So one of the examples of that is the reclamation program in our coastal area. So as a youth, as a journalist, and as a leader in our community, we had conversations with the fisher folks, and all of them shared the same concerns. But let me tell you a specific story of Ate Jen. So Ate Jen is a mussel farmer. She was raised by a family of mussel farmers. And as she grew up, this is what she mainly relies on when it comes to putting food to the table. She mainly relies on mussel farming to provide educational help to her children. And one of her biggest concerns when it comes to the reclamation program is the displacement of fisher folks like Ate Jen. But back then, I was very young. I haven't really delved around the topics of reclamation program. And given by the name, I only know, oh, there's something that we need to reclaim. Sounds fun. But I didn't know that there will be displaced fisher folks. There will be heightened risks of wastes because if we reclaim land, the old trash from below will be unearthed to the surface. And that happened when Typhoon Karina came. So it haunted us in a way that when Typhoon Karina happened, all of us were armed. All of us were equipped with brooms, dustpans, ready to flick away the garbage that enters our households. We have this kind of, a duty, like, okay, hold this, get the trash away from our homes. So we are tasked with that. And when we think about the role of youth when it comes to these disasters, some would say that we are only in our homes, waiting for class suspensions, waiting for excuses when it comes to assignments, tasks. But we beg to differ because one of my friends here, who is also part of our community, her name is Iris, and she's part of the Tanza Youth Organization. And they are the ones who took the lead when it comes to rescue operations and evacuation camp management. So Iris, together with her organization, they took part in giving the relief goods and surveying our area. They had to wade to the flood waters, which poses the risks of dengue, just to search for families who needed rescuing. She had to rescue, I remember, a pregnant woman in the middle of the raging rains. She had to call for help. She searched for the people who are capable of helping, boats that can rescue them, but to no avail, nobody answered. And in times of despair, Iris seek help to Plan International Philippines. She had to call Ate Joy, who is busy and taking care of her children in times of these typhoons. As a youth and a woman, she also saw the struggles of the elderly, the lactating women, mothers, children, and youth who had to fight for the relief goods because the parents of each household claim that the relief goods given to them were not enough to feed their children. And with all of these experiences, Iris took the lead in creating a project dedicated to the PWD community. But to no avail, there are still some problems that the youth had to experience when it comes to project implementations. And one of that is the inconsistent schedulings, where we often hear the words that it's not part of their program, it's not part of their priorities, or they lack the resources to implement the projects dedicated to the youth and initiated by the youth. And oftentimes when we initiate dialogues with these leaders, we will be tagged as nuisance or persons who oppose these leaders. And some people would also tag us as a cute, laughing matter. But this is not a laughing matter, ladies and gentlemen. We are not laughing when it comes to climate action. But yeah, youth initiatives should not be romanticized as youth initiatives alone. Because we, as part of the vulnerable sector, we provide aid to those who are vulnerable as well. But there should be cases that should be provided to us, such as the safeguarding, capacity building, and of course, intergenerational actions that include nature-based solutions to ensure that the next generations of women and children will not suffer to the crisis that was made today. And when it comes to these issues, it should also be a collective effort where all sectors are included or engaged. And one of them are the Filipino families. And the word resilience. I know that resilience is a very good thing because when we talk about resilience, it talks about the ability to bounce back after a disaster. But we should not wait for a disaster to come because it desensitizes the graveness of a disaster or of a risk. When we talk about typhoons, it's okay for the children and youth to wade these floods, to wade these dengue-infested floods. It's okay for the women to be anxious, searching for the food that they have to put on the table. It's okay for the elderly to experience struggles when it comes to supplies. All of these are okay. As long as we are resilient, it is enough. And we had to battle that idea. So I encourage everyone to go out of the zone of resiliency because it's an action directed after a disaster. So what do we want for our community? What can the youth, children, and women do for these struggles? I personally call for providing resources and mangrove restoration projects to mitigate heavy floodings, especially in coastal areas. There should be investment in green spaces. If we look at the community, there should be vertical gardens where families can plant, harvest, and eat these crops that they have planted. For the youth, there should be involvement in climate action, environmental protection, and just transition, where meaningful engagements are created and answered. There are a lot of climate champions, I think, that is here with us on the panel, so please give yourselves a round of applause. Congratulations, and also in the Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us in this call. Yeah, we have a lot of projects and what we need is the resources, the space, the platform to implement these projects that we know are important for our youth. So one of the best examples of that is, of course, the Tanza Youth Organization. With Iris as the member, they established a community library dedicated to discussing climate action. There is also Rex, my friend from Plan International from Eastern Samar, who led the mangrove restoration in their area. So these are the initiatives given by the youth. So all in all, vulnerable sectors, yes, we experience greater impact when it comes to disasters. And what we need most, again, are nature-driven approaches to enhance resilience against climate impacts and to mitigate the upcoming disasters. Because when topics of vulnerability arise, there are some assumptions that we need guidance. But we don't just need guidance. We have a voice. We have a platform. We want to be heard and addressed. And when it comes to climate and environmental actions, taking another step to include the fragile areas and engaging with them are important in crafting projects. And now, ladies and gentlemen, more than ever, women, children, and youth are taking the lead to ensure that we push for climate and environmental initiatives that are consultative, inclusive, and empowering. Then if this is met, all of these fragilities, vulnerabilities will be transformed into mobility. It is now the time for the women to be highlighted, for the youth to be taken seriously, and for the children to be included and engaged. Because when it comes to climate action and women empowerment, it is now our time for the girls to take over. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Onoa, for your advocacy intervention and so passionately outlining the issues and realities of climate change and disasters for women and girls in the Philippines. So I now have the pleasure to consecutively introduce three amazing young women leaders who will consecutively tell us about what they are doing or their organizations are doing in the space of nature-based solutions for climate action. So first, I'm going to start with Prachi Shivguanka, who I actually had the pleasure to meet last year, I think, last year, and be on the panel with at an event that was affiliated with the G20 process in India. And it was actually a planet on gender and climate change. And I was saying afterwards, I hope we can get her to come to ADB one day. So I'm really pleased that she's able to be here today. So Prachi is the CEO of an organization called Cool the Globe. Cool the Globe is both an app and a movement which helps citizens answer a simple question of what they can do for climate change. So it's an empowering app. I'll let her tell you much more about it, but just to say that so far, the app has more than 100,000 users from 150 countries, which have collectively reduced 6,000 tons of CO2 equivalent by making changes to their daily lives. So to you, Prachi, you can tell us much more about it.
Hi, everybody. I just came in last night and I was so excited to be here for a couple of reasons. The first reason, of course, was I was excited to meet you again, Samantha. And it'll be my first time in Philippines, so I was excited to see the city. I was excited to meet everybody in ADB that I've been interacting with for the past couple of weeks. And most importantly, I was excited because I knew I was going to be meeting some remarkable young people today. But I have to say, though, I was telling Benjamin that there's another highlight that has been like a highlight of my day so far, and that completely made the trip to Philippines seem worth it already, which is the chocolate crinkles outside. I mean, did you try those? And I definitely do not have 3 in my pocket right now. So I was telling Alana that it seems like there's an expert for everything at ADB, and there's an expert for the intersections of everything as well. And that's so wonderful because even my journey started in climate when I was working on issues other than climate. When I was 18, I went on a year-long quest to figure out how I could make some kind of a meaningful difference through my career. And I'd of course heard about climate change before. But till then, it seemed like this larger than life issue beyond my control. It seemed like these big words: global warming, coastal erosion, loss of biodiversity. I was 18, I had enough on my plate. And I saw so many issues in front of me, from poverty to illiteracy to inequality. I thought, why should I care about polar ice melting in some other part of the world? And so I decided to think about my part of the world. I spent the next year traveling across India, working with farmers, waste pickers, children, working in health, agriculture, education. And it was when I was doing that for the first time, I met the very people and the voices behind the catastrophic effects of climate change that I'd only heard about till then. I remembered meeting an old farmer who taught me more about climate change than any other global expert ever could. He said, small farmers like me just can't afford to keep doing it anymore. कारण ऊन पावसाचं गणितच बिघडलंय, which means the weather has become so unreliable. And when I can't afford to grow food, there are 1,000 people behind me who can't afford to buy food. So climate change means more and more people go hungry. I remember meeting an extremely bright young girl when I was working in education. I asked her, which standard are you in? She said, I don't go to school anymore. Why is that? It was because her town was seeing a drought and water was being used scarcely throughout. And her house only got water for 1 hour in the afternoon. Nobody else in her family could afford to stay at home during that time. So she had to do it. That's when I realized that when I read about extreme weather events like droughts happening more frequently and more intensely because of climate change, that also means that bright young girls like her have to skip school and stay at home to fill buckets with water. And this I care about. The more time I spent on ground working on these other issues, that I kept seeing climate change everywhere. And I kept realizing that climate change is not just about these big words. It affects our health, it affects our food, it affects our livelihoods. And as young girls, it affects our economic, social, and human rights. It bothered me. I wanted to do something about it. I remember going to my father and asking him, what can an ordinary girl like me do about a big problem like climate change? And we decided to start from our own home. We took up a challenge to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions by 10% that year. But how? Which activities of mine are leading to most emissions? How can I reduce them? So I started doing simple things at first. My college was 15 kilometers away, so I tried going on a cycle for a few days a month. I tried using public transport, tried recycling the plastic in my house. And as I started doing these things, I realized that if I had to continue on this journey, I had to measure the impact of these small sustainable actions I was taking in my day-to-day life. And so I started looking at how do I calculate the avoided emissions behind these actions. And as I started doing that, two very interesting things happened. The first one was that I began to enjoy it. It almost became like a fun activity that I was doing with my family. And it felt good that at least at my own level, I was doing something. And maybe because I was enjoying it so much, my friends, neighbors, people around me started to take notice. They would come to me and say, it looks like you're doing something interesting, and we would like to be a part of it. That's when I started thinking, how can I take this individual quest I've started and get global citizens like you to join me in it? And from this was born Cool the Globe. From the dorm room of my college, I built this app to unite citizens like us to start taking climate action in our day-to-day lives. The way it would work is, how many of you know the calories in your food? Okay, well, a lot of us are young, we don't have to think about that yet. But yeah. So just the way people are sort of aware about the calories in their food, can we know the emissions behind our actions and the avoided emissions behind our sustainable actions? So the app would give a monthly target to each user to reduce their carbon footprint, and then it'll show hundreds of simple day-to-day climate actions that we can take across our day, and it would calculate the CO2 emissions we are avoiding by doing that. So I built this platform, and then I realized that now the real work starts. The real work is in convincing people that in the face of climate change, our actions matter, and we can make a difference. So we started putting up campaigns on what the ordinary citizen can do about climate change. And our message was very simple. Let each one of us pledge to reduce our carbon footprint by 10% every year. So what we told people was something very simple. We said, don't go to global experts. You don't have to go through reports. You don't have to read newspapers to figure out what to do. To figure out what you can do in your day, there's a very simple solutions. You have to go back to your grandmother and you have to ask her, what are the things you used to do to become sustainable? Because sustainability has been a part of our generation, a part of our culture for generations. And when we did that, something very interesting happened. People very organically started gravitating towards nature-based solutions in their own homes. I remember a girl went up to her grandmother and asked her, I've decided to reduce my carbon footprint. What do you think I can do to become sustainable? Her grandmother told her two things. She said, firstly, stop eating stale food and stop drinking water from the refrigerator. So her grandmother told her to eliminate the fridge from her life. So that's what she did. She took a month-long challenge to not use the refrigerator at all. And she used something called mart, which is an organic clay pot that people used to use in the generations before us. She went back to it and she used a plant called vada, which would make water cooler. So she started doing that, and she said, I feel so much healthier at the end of the month. Not only that, she came on the app and recorded saving 20 kilograms of CO2 emissions just by doing this. Another person came and decided that they would make a kitchen garden. in their balcony. They created their kitchen garden. They started segregating their waste and composting the wet waste in the kitchen garden. She saw that the plants were thriving multifold from the waste, and she recorded saving 4 kilograms of CO2 emissions on the app just by doing that. Another person did something interesting. She used her grandmother's old saris, and they stitched a godhadi out of this, which is a quilt. So she, instead of buying new blankets, she repurposed her grandmother's old outfits to create their own blanket and recorded saving 20 kilograms of CO2 emissions on the app again. So many people like that. Another user called me up and said, I'm building a new home and I've decided to do something unique. For generations, people have been using a ventilation system in Indian homes, which is cow dung. They coat their homes with cow dung, and that creates as an excellent natural ventilator. So he decided to, instead of building a house with cement, he decided to build a mud house and coated it with cow dung again and saved thousands of kilograms of CO2 emissions on the app. So we saw people gravitating towards the nature-based solutions that already existed in the culture, and taking actions like that, recording them on the app and figuring out the CO2 emissions they were saving by doing that. And I saw how one climate action inspired 10 others and created a ripple effect for change. People began sharing their actions with each other, became our ambassadors for climate action. And just through citizen-led, grassroots, action-oriented movements like this, we reached over 25 million people around the world. As I speak to you, we have users from 150 countries. Many of them are from Philippines as well, even though it's my first time in Philippines. At the end of the week, when I return back to India, I hope the number of those users would have increased manyfold, because all of you would have become our ambassadors as well. All of these users from different parts of the world have come together. Over 100,000 citizens came together on Cool the Globe app and recorded saving 5.5 million kilograms of CO2 emissions. And this is just the beginning. Our next target now is to bring nature-based solutions on the app, projects for agroforestry, projects for mangrove restoration, so that citizens can unite on the platform and contribute to nature-based solutions near their own homes. At the beginning of this journey, I'd read somewhere that it's going to take a miracle to avoid the worst effects of climate change. But when citizens like us come together and take climate action in our own homes, I believe that miracles can happen. So thank you so much for having me here today. And talk to you soon.
Thank you, Prachi. Very inspiring. And I think just by this, you've probably increased your users by a significant group. I could see people downloading on their phones already. So I now have the pleasure of introducing Dikatauna Kwa, or Dika, as she's called, she's a 26-year-old biologist and small business owner from Papua New Guinea with a strong passion for conservation research and youth empowerment. She's an entrepreneur, and she established something called the Ida Davara Marine Sanctuary, which is managed under her small business, Katal Life Consultancy, which operates in her home province in PNG. So I will let Dika tell you much more about her journey. Over to you.
Thank you, Samantha. And hi, everyone. Good Pala morning. My name is Dikatauna, as Sammy has introduced, and I am the co-founder of Catalite Consultancy, a small business based out of Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. Today, I am sharing about our environmental stewardship initiative called the Ida Davara Marine Sanctuary. But before I move on, I would like to thank ADB for inviting me to come here. I've only come through Manila. I actually haven't stayed, and I'm using this opportunity to see a beautiful city as well. Next slide, please. So our motivation at Ida Davara is to teach the next generation about their environment and the beautiful organisms that coexist with humans. As Sir David Attenborough rightly put, if children don't grow up knowing about nature and appreciating it, they will not understand it. And if they don't understand it, they won't protect it. Next slide, please. Now, Eda Davara is an environmental initiative that aims to provide a platform for university students and fresh graduates to conduct research to promote green and blue sustainable development in PNG, while sharing knowledge with children within the community. Next slide, please. The sanctuary is based at the Kohua Research Center, which is located in Baraka Village in the Central Province. To support the local economy in the area, we have established a basic social enterprise model that promotes the growth of the local economy and advocates for the protection of coastal marine ecosystems. Next slide, please. So, Catalite is an all-female run organization run by women between the ages of 23 and 30. And the Eda Davara management team is also run by young women, including myself. Next slide, please. The Eda Davara research team, or more affectionately known by the locals as the Guardians of the Tide, are our team of youth volunteers that run our programs at the Marine Sanctuary. By bridging the gap between education and scientific research, the Eda Davara research team emerges as a beacon of environmental advocacy in Papua New Guinea. Next slide, please. So, using information from the research conducted, we carry out various community, educational, and ecotourism activities. These activities are carried out by the Eda Davara team and youths in the community. As you can see, we do school awarenesses. We do a holiday program called the Eco Explorers, where we invite children from grades 8 to 12 to come and learn about marine ecosystems. And we do Kohua beach tours, which are more targeted at the adults, especially from Port Moresby. A bit of background, Port Moresby is about 40 minutes drive away from our sanctuary. And we also have a Kohua beach nursery where we collect and grow mangrove seedlings. As it is a scientific research center, we also group them into different species, and then we plant them using traditional methods from the area. So we do advocate for traditional knowledge to be integrated into our content that is being shared by the public. Next slide, please. So at Eda Davara, we have 2 internship programs that are targeted at children and youth. The Eco Scholars program, which is in blue, for youths that are senior undergraduates in Port Moresby. And although the program is mainly for those in the science disciplines, we also have some interns from the humanities and business disciplines. The Eco Rangers, in red, is an 8-month program that is targeted at children in grades 6 to 8 at the local primary school in Baraka Village. This program focuses on encouraging environmental stewardship through education and social interactions. So the Eco Scholars act as mentors for the Eco Rangers and guide them through the 8-month program. So once again, what the Eco Scholars learn, they're giving back to the community. And what the Eco Rangers they take it back to their homes and they talk about it to their families, and that is where we get a lot of our support from within the community. Next slide, please. So our impact. We are proud to be a woman-led organization and would like to honor all the girls and young women who are involved in our activities. In this year's cohort, we have 68% of the Eco Rangers being 11 to 16-year-old girls, and 75% of the Eco Scholars being young women between the ages of 21 and 25. We also have 2 reflections on the screen from a representative from each internship program. That is right up there. But we will move on because time is catching up. So next slide, please. I can provide the slide to anyone who would want to get a hold of it. Now, this particular slide is very important because we couldn't do our work without the support from the community that we work with. I am fortunate enough to work with my own people, with the group where I identify from. So all our work could not be possible without their support. We acknowledge the youths and elders that play their part in ensuring our coastlines are protected and that our people may continue to be resilient to the effects of climate change. Being from the Pacific, we are a region that don't contribute a lot, but we are affected a lot. And I think I speak for all Pacific Islanders as I stand up here today in the Asian region. Now, lastly, I would like to highlight and reinforce that Edda-Doveri Marine Sanctuary would not have as much impact and reach in our community without the involvement of youths and female leaders that have stepped up to take the lead. Next slide. Emta Sol and Taniku Baraheria, the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dika, for sharing about the really interesting work of your sanctuary. I think we should make that information widely known amongst our ADB colleagues that work in PNG and also visit. I myself would love to visit when I next have the opportunity to travel to Moresby. Okay, so on to our third speaker. Last but not least, we have Sabrina Escalona, who is an environmental designer and licensed chemical engineer working specifically on nature-based solutions for water cycle restoration and rainwater harvesting in the Philippines. She's designed many urban and rural spaces, including schools, farms, resorts, evacuation centers. She's also a startup enthusiast and co-founder of something called Rainfold, which is a foldable rainwater harvesting tank that transforms rainwater into safe drinkable water. She also manages Water Project PH, which is a digital platform to educate Filipinos. And also, just to add something else to her claim to fame, she's one of 20 Filipino women champions of the water sector for this year, 2024. So the floor is yours, Sabrina.
Thank you, Samantha. So it is such an honor to be here with Prachi, Dika, and senior and young leaders of today. So I'm Sab. Our very good Sir Benjamin. All right, so I'm Sab, and I'm a Filipina environmental designer for nature-based water projects. When I talk about what I do as an environmental designer, this is mostly me. But on the day-to-day, these three pictures encapsulate who I am. I'm in my field clothes. I love nature. I'm always experimenting with rainwater harvesting in my own home. And on the side, I love vlogging about sustainability projects. And as a young girl, I've dared to believe in things adults had a hard time believing in. I believed that I could change the world with a crayon and paper in my hand, drawing Save the Earth posters and giving it to my neighbors. I grew up in the US, and my dad, he took me everywhere. I went camping, fishing, hiking, bonfires. Nature became my playground. And when I moved here in the Philippines when I was 10, I realized that that world, that childhood I grew up in was not the reality that many Filipinos grew up in. I realized that the natural playground I grew up in was a concrete playground here. And that's when something switched in me. I knew that for the rest of my life, I wanted to dedicate to conserving and protecting nature so that people my age and people younger than me would still know how it's like to have nature as your best friend. So today, as a young professional, I believe in much bigger dreams. I believe in a water-abundant world where no one, not even nature, thirsts. Because the reality is the Philippines is filled with rain. And yet, why are we experiencing water scarcity? The reason why is because there's two types of water scarcity. Physical scarcity, wherein there's a lack of rain, but this is not the case for the Philippines because we get so much rain that in fact, we're part of the top 5 most rain-abundant countries in South Asia. But the second type of scarcity is economic water scarcity. And this is the lack of infrastructure to collect and distribute water. And our government has been focusing on the distribution of water that we've sort of taken for granted the creation of our water supply. And this is because we have basically focused on the distribution end that we are not creating enough water supply because we have impeded the natural water cycle. where we are over extracting our deep well and our groundwater supplies more than we are recharging them. So this over extraction has caused an imbalance in our water cycle. And this leads to extreme flooding and extreme heat because water is the greatest regulator of our climate. So we as humans, we have broken the water cycle, but we as humans have the power to restore our water cycle back to health. And as an environmental designer, my role is to help nature repair and restore itself faster than it would naturally, so that we can mitigate climate impacts, cool the planet, and restore the balance of our water cycle. And with my chemical engineering degree, I realized what engineering was made for. Engineering was made to help nature restore itself, to work with nature, not seek to control nature. Therefore, I asked if the challenge is with natural processes when it comes to our water supply. Therefore, doesn't it make sense that the solutions should also be nature-based? So at our young environmental consultancy firm, EcoSentia Solutions, we advocate for nature-based solutions to cool and heal the planet in two ways. First, education. We are the voice of the voiceless, and that is nature. We speak on nature's behalf by working with corporations, working with governments to educate on water cycle awareness. And second, action, to defend the poorest of the poor, and that's Mother Earth. So we've conducted many nature-based designs, three of which here, really quick, is an evacuation complex where we created hybrid rainwater harvesting systems to create water supply in the area. We've mitigated flood in schools by utilizing an underground harvesting well and using that water to serve as toilet flushing water and open up more CRs in the restrooms in the schools. And lastly, to work with farms in the creation of water from flood, as a form of irrigation. But next year, we're dreaming much, much bolder and bigger. And we'd like to, and we're moving forward our educational or learning caravan, where we aim to work with institutional agencies. All right, hold on. Institutional agencies and other partners to be able to get water out there. And lastly, our 100 recharge wells project, where we want to rehydrate the drying wells of our Nueva Ecija farmers. So we can't do this alone, and we're looking for partners to help us, young girls, community leaders, NGOs, ADB, to work with us in the education and the action side. Because before, I was just one small girl with a big dream. But today, I'm a big girl with even bigger dreams. And everyone here has great big dreams, but we can only drive our dreams forward with education and action. So today, I invite everyone here, let's dream big together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I don't know about you all, but it's like very overwhelming, this major energy inspiration coming from these amazing leaders that we have. So I'd like to invite them all to come and join me now. Actually, I should have done that when you finish all your talks. So please come and take any of these three seats next to me. We are running a little bit behind time, but what I would like to do, because I know that the audience in the room and online probably have questions, so I will ask each of you a question up here, and then I will probably open it up to the floor as things go. So maybe just going backwards, starting with you, Sab, given that we just said, you were one of the 20 water champions of the year. So can you tell us what you think what is the added value or unique contribution that young women make to this space? I think so for the people online, or they can't hear you.
All right. Hello? Okay, there. Yeah, so being part of that fellowship program, I was able to work with 19 other young women leaders, young and senior, in the water sector, and everyone is doing their own thing. So I specifically was working in the nature-based sector side, and a lot we're working in dams, in the local concessionaires, and then also in the bigger national regulatory bodies. And the power that women were able to provide to the water sector is that women have a first-hand experience, a first-hand respect for nature, because they are the ones who are working at home, experiencing what it's like like to actually be able to use water for as simple as laundering, washing the dishes. We know what it's like. We have an actual connection with it. And I think that's what bonded all of us together in that space, is that we understand that water is not just an asset. It is something that we have that right to respect and love. And so wherever field that we were working in, we all carry that same passion. And women have that passion because of their connection with nature. So that for me is really great.
Thank you. So basically, it's a lived experience and relating it to that. Thank you. Okay, so Dika, I'm going to ask you a similar question because you talked about your organization being women-led, right? So what do you see as the role of young girls, in particular, in marine sanctuary initiatives, and what approaches have been effective so far in empowering them to get involved?
Thank you for... Hello? Yes. Oh, okay. All right. That's a great question. I would just like to point out, first of all, that I am quite fortunate in my particular community because I am third generation woman, educated woman. And in my particular family that I am currently working in, women have been taking the lead. My auntie, my uncles, my cousins, my brothers, they look up to us to lead in my family. I wouldn't say it's the same in my culture, but in my specific family, it is like that. And because of that, I have standing in my community, and I am respected, which is why when I took my ideas home, my family opened arms and they're like, "Come, we're here." So, and I think you can experience that in other communities as well. As a young woman and as a Pacific Islander, we have our own challenges, cultural challenges, traditional norms that we have to break in order to go and give back to our families, our communities. So one of my biggest advice to a lot of young women that do want to get into conservation, do want to give back to your family, is that you need to go. Times have changed. Go home and give all you have. They know your background. They know what you do. They know that you've been educated, that you have brilliant ideas, and it's not all with the men. Apologies. I love all the men in my family, in my community, in my circles, but I have worked with women, and women have very innovative ideas. We have a lot of solutions, and like Sab has said, we have real life experience that men don't know how to navigate and don't know how to, so they don't have solutions for these problems that we have. So for young women that do want to get into marine conservation, want to get into these sort of initiatives, I think the first thing that I would advise you to do is to go to your community and listen to them. Don't just go and push your agenda onto them. Listen to them. Understand what they want. They know what they want, all right? They're the ones living in there. They know what the problem is. They have ideas too, but they just don't have that platform. And as a young woman, you can provide that. And that is what I did. I went to my people, I talked to them. I said, look, I have my business. I can come in and we can manage our land properly. We can educate our children. We can provide, economic activities so that our people can, make money so that you can send your children to school, to buy sugar, to buy rice, They don't just want to eat fish and taro, sweet potato all the time. They want to have something from town as well. They even want to have tin fish, believe it or not. So go back to your community, take all the skills and knowledge that you have with you, go back, talk to them, and find a way to align your values and to, give back. That's the big thing here. A lot of young women these days, like me, are third, fourth generation educated women. And we don't know what it's like in the village, do we? We don't know what it's like in the rural communities. But that is where we come from. That is where our identity is. We need to go back. And that is all from me. Thank you, Samara.
Thank you very much, Dika, for sharing. And so, very strong message here about using your skills and giving back and going back to your roots, but also about the importance of role modeling that you had and the role modeling forward that you can give and creating the space for women to be able to contribute. So moving to Prachi now, talking about digital, what do you think is the power of digital platforms for young people and women in particular, given the gender digital divide? Do you have some thoughts on that you could share?
Hi, absolutely. I think what turning to technology and digital really helped me do is it helped me take something that started at an individual level and scale it to a mass level. When I began my journey in climate action, I could not have imagined that there'd be so many people sitting on another side of the world who also care about this. In fact, when we first started building Cool the Globe app, me and my dad, we used to joke that we are going to be the only 2 users of the app because, because who else is going to care and who else is going to care enough to take action? And so we said, you know what, doesn't matter. There will come a time when this is needed. And for that time, it may come 5 years from now, it may come 10 years from now. But when it comes, we want this solution that we created from our heart to be out there. And so another thing that the digital media helped me do is that I was just a young student. I had no idea how to build an app. What I started doing is I just started reaching out to people who were in this space. I started reaching out to environmental activists, to experts, to storyboarders, to people, developers. And, I started learning how to code, how to structure, how to do UX, UI design. We put thousands of hours into research to a point where at some point, if you could tell me like the GDP of a country, I could guess their emissions. You really have to work with missionary zeal when you're building something. Just hard work is not important, not enough. You have to connect with people. You have to go to global experts. You have to find like-minded people who will support you, uplift you, mentor you. And that's what the digital medium helped me do. I learned how to code online. I got the first few mentors for the app online. I got the first 100 users through the first campaign that we did, who came and recorded their climate actions on the app, and then they told 10 other people about it. Another thing that technology helps us do is measure the impact of what we are doing. So I realized that just taking climate actions is not enough. I need to be able to know what is the difference that I'm making. That's why we built the platform, which as soon as I put in a climate action, it would tell me the CO2 emissions I've saved by doing that. The first beta version that we had launched of the app, we got 500 young people to test it. And I remember a 6th grader from a neighboring town called me up and said, I've taken this climate action in my own life, but I keep thinking, what difference can one person make? But we believe that when a lot of people like us come together, our collective impact can be extraordinary. And I wanted to showcase that. And that's where, again, technology came in. On the homepage of the app, even now, there's a global meter which shows in real time the emissions saved by all of us combined. And there are citizens from 150 countries who are putting in their small foot forward and witnessing the collective impact of all of us taking action. So I feel like technology helps us scale, it helps us measure. But what's most important is the people behind the technology, and we must never forget that.
Thank you, Prachi. So I will open the floor now. If there are any questions, can I ask you to raise your hand classroom style? And then someone will bring you an app. But to start with, we have quite an interesting question online, which is a good segue from that, actually. How do we talk about climate change to people under the age of 17? How do we talk about climate change to kids? And how do we get them engaged? Anyone have some? Sure.
Okay, that is an awesome question. I work with young kids, and my approach is practical learning. We take kids out to the ocean, and we take them one of our programs is a seagrass meadow exploration, which is basically taking the kids to the beach that they grew up in, they went swimming in, and showing them how to properly look at what's there using ecological techniques, or what I went to school for. So we use this thing called quadrant sampling. It's basically just a 1 meter sort of box that they just throw into the seagrass, and they go and they look at the different seagrass species and the little organisms that are there. And as I said in my presentation, and as how Sir David Attenborough has said, how are our children going to protect if they don't understand? And that is the approach that we take. We take kids out and give them that practical experience. We do that with the seagrass, we do that with the mangroves. We've called kids over to come and do mangrove seedling collection with us. So they're not only planting, but they're also picking up the seeds, and then they're learning how to nurse these seeds before it's been put back into the land. And then they help us monitor the growth as well. So it becomes an experience. And I believe, and my team believes, that if you give them that experience, they will understand how to protect the environment, they will also, as they're growing up, they will see the changes in the environment. And that is what climate change really is, changes in the environment. And they will see how they need to solve these climate problems, as I did. I grew up in the village. I've seen the differences. I've seen the particular area that we're working in. I've seen how seagrass have changed, how mangroves have changed. And I know what the difference is. I've seen reefs, fringing reefs that I used to go swimming and snorkeling in from like 20 years ago are now being destroyed by dynamite fishing and by coral bleaching. So you, especially with local kids, they can see the difference. And we also open this program to kids that live in the city. So they come and they also see and feel and touch. If they don't feel and touch, they will not know what's going on. And that is how you get the message across to children.
Thank you for that. So basically, it's about experiential learning. And I think all of you are actually really good examples of that, because you can relate about, I see, Prachi, you want to say something, but maybe just to add to that before, because there's kind of a related question online, which is, and all of you are actually in technical areas of expertise, and we often talk about how we need to get more women and young girls into STEM in order to help address some of the challenges. So the question is, what advice can you give young girls who are afraid of stepping into fields dominated by men?
Okay, so I remember very early on, one of my first mentors taught me something very interesting. This was around the time when I told you at 18, I traveled across India. What I was doing was, I was reaching out to people who were my role models, and I was asking them, can I shadow you for a couple of months? And in doing that, I spent about 4 months shadowing a woman entrepreneur called Nalini Shekhar, who was the founder of an organization that was turning waste pickers into entrepreneurs. And I asked her the same question, because waste, especially in India, is a field dominated by men and dominated by very scary men, if I had that. So I asked her, are you not afraid of being the only person in this? How do you deal with this? And she said, I flip the coin and use it to my advantage. Because I'm the only woman in this space, they don't know how to deal with me. They've never had to face something like this. So they don't know how to talk to a woman. They don't know how to threaten a woman. And when I go to them and I start speaking, they're almost, paralyzed for a minute, because they've never had to deal with this. And so she said, as a woman, of course, you're going to face differences in fields that are dominated by men, but you have to flip the coin and you have to decide how you get looked at. Now, especially, I'm always telling my mother, in most spaces I go to, usually I'm stopped at the door because they think, who's this young girl trying to get in? I tell her there are usually 2 phases. One is before, I've spoken or before people know about the work we're doing, and you get to experience being almost an invisible little girl. And then there's an after, when you've spoken about the work, when you've told them that you're doing something meaningful. And that's when people start taking you seriously. Now, there's a there's a side to being a young girl in this field, which is that people may not take you as seriously at first glance. But I would say use it to your advantage, because there's so few people who are doing this. You'd also experience more and more people willing to help you, willing to support you, wanting to mentor you, and wanting to be a part of your journey. So every weakness can be turned into a strength. So I would say, yes, there are differences in being a woman, but those differences can be used to our advantage.
Thank you, Prachi. So I'm going to move to you next, but just to, and you can build on any of the previous two questions, because we have a bit of a trend here in the type of questions we're getting. This third question is about what unique challenges have you faced as a young woman in a leadership role related to climate change? So maybe you'd like to share some perspectives building on.
Yeah, so I career shifted. So from chemical engineering, the first challenge I ever dealt with is I was going in blind to something I had no experience with. And when a lot of my colleagues, they were going into the classic chemical engineering path, working in FMCG companies, corporations, I decided to take a different path, a totally different path. And I didn't have a lot of peers who could relate to me. So when I pursued my job, my first ever job in environmental consultancy, it was because I was holding on, like I said in my story, to a dream. And I knew that if I'm going to, my life is short. If I'm going to use my life, might as well use it to pursuing something I already knew as a young girl, like what I wanted to do. And I was so blessed because, as Prachi was saying, and Dika, when you find that support group, when you find those mentors who are willing to teach you, to take you on, you can start from nowhere and you can become an expert. And I'm very blessed. Actually, my team is here with me today, Queenie and Gabe. They're my mentors in this space. They taught me everything I knew now. And I would say that if you want to take a risk, you want to go for your dream, go for it, and look for those mentors who are willing to teach you along the way, who won't make you fear if you have a stupid question to ask. Because my mentors, they make me feel safe. When I don't understand something, I can easily come to them, and even if it's the dumbest question, they help me find my way to the answer. They don't tell me the answer, they help me find that on my own. So I would say that's something that you should take that risk and go for it.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. I mean, I think in all the amazing positivity here is all about, the glass is always half full rather than half empty, and how do you use your position? There's a common theme here, to turn it into a positive, using whatever support mechanisms that you can sort of mobilize. Unfortunately, out of time for questions. So I am going to now turn over to my colleague, Ben, who is going to step back into his shoes as the Director of Fragility and Engagement and share some closing reflections on the panel discussion. Over to you, Ben.
Let's give another round of applause to all of our participants. It's always so difficult to come in and speak at the end after such inspiring speakers. It'd be like coming in after a superstar has a concert and then sing. So I'm going to keep it short and simple. I just want to thank all of you again. You have amazing stories, amazing journeys, and really inspiring. I was dropping my daughter at school this morning, and she was reading all the bios and was getting inspired without you even knowing it. And I told her, actually, today something cool is going to happen at work. One of these ladies is going to take over my role. And Young Win's going to take over my role. She's going to speak on my behalf and sort of step in and do what I would normally do. And she said, that's very cool. Can I do that? She always likes visiting ADB and coming into this room in particular. And I said, maybe next year, this year's theme is Girls Takeover. Maybe next year will be Daughters Takeover. So she can come in and take over. This is, it is an important event, not just here, but globally. In the last 6 years, more than 6,000 leaders' roles have been taken over by girls. And I'm in very good company, so I feel very proud to be part of this list I'm about to read to you. The president of Timor-Leste, President of Switzerland, Paraguay, Malawi have all been taken over by girls on this occasion. Vice Presidents of Colombia, Sierra Leone, and South Sudan. The leaders of ASEAN, the resident rep of UNDP in Nepal, and leaders of many companies and other organizations throughout the world have been taken over. This is one of the best parts of my job. In my division, we've got two teams, and one of them is the civil society team led by Heidi here. Thank you, Heidi. Please give her a quick round of applause. And part of our role is to support ADB and its engagements with civil society, whether it's through our policies or dialogues and international partnerships, or on individual projects in many of the countries. And as you heard from Ramesh speaking earlier, we do have so many projects in so many sectors and countries and communities. It's imperative that we do engage with civil society and with community groups that focus on not just climate and nature-based solutions and some of these big challenges, but also really engage with different types of groups, young women's groups, youth groups, women's groups in general, and other groups that focus on a lot of these big challenges. And so one of the things that excites me is that we're working on, for the first time, an operational approach for enhanced engagement with civil society that will take us to the next level, if you will, in engaging with these different groups on these major challenges. I was really inspired by a lot of the individual stories that you had. Noah, you talked about really the role of youth in responding to disasters, and also not just being resilient after a disaster happens, but actually building resilience in advance. You also talked about the vulnerable, supporting the vulnerable, and that support is needed to help people help each other in the communities. So that was really inspiring. Prachi, you talked about the cost of climate change on individual lives, right? If you have to take water and miss school because of that, think about the costs in terms of somebody's opportunities going forward in their life. You talked about the zeal that is required to really make change happen. We often talk about thinking globally and acting locally, but your app is taking it to the next level. So thinking globally, acting locally, and changing individually with the help of modern technology. So I think that was very inspiring. Dika, you talked about this interesting social enterprise model. That's something that we're looking at more closely, is how do we work with social enterprises, not just nonprofits and civil society groups traditionally, but these enterprises that are quite innovative and bringing in both the civil society and charitable, but also other types of activities that can also earn revenue or other types of resources. So your discussion about conservation, nature-based solutions, eco-rangers and eco-scholars, I love those terms. They're empowering in themselves. And then finally, Sab, you did call me a senior, or at least you pointed in my direction. So I am over 50, so I'll accept that. But you also talk about really the broken down water cycle, and that was really enlightening in terms of seeing how both on the economic side as well, these need to be restored, and the role of environmental design and engineering to restore balance in these cycles, and also really speaking on nature's behalf. The other thing that really inspired me about all of your statements is that you used your own skills and technology, or your capabilities and education, to then give back, whether it's going back to the community, giving back to your country, or to giving back to nature and to the other communities that you serve. And so some very clear cross-cutting storylines that are inspiring to all of us. Let me close by thanking Sam, our moderator, and her team on the gender division for partnering with our division on this. I think this is a great illustration of working across our different teams. I also want to thank Ramesh, who's had to leave for another meeting. And I also want to thank Plan International. As you have seen, some of our visitors here today and from our banners here, Plan is one of ADB's institutional partners. We work closely with them on a range of different initiatives. Alana and team, who have also helped to organize this. Let's give them a round of applause. Eka and the other Sam, thank you for helping us get this successfully across the line. And finally, I just want to thank all of you, our participants, who came from all the different schools and all the different parts of the Philippines in particular, and those of you who have come from even further afar. So with that, and hand it back to Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So that brings us to the end of our event. Thank you again, everybody. And I think we can all say that with with future women leaders, current and future women leaders, I think we are very hopeful that the future is in good hands. Have a good day, everybody.